black gold and broken trust. It began with a single anonymous email. The message landed in the inbox of the Federal Forensic Audit Commission (FFAC) in Washington, D.C. The sender's name was hidden, the subject line simple. Billions are leaking through the pipelines. Look at Petroforge Global. Attached was a spreadsheet, hundreds of rows of transactions, each marked exploration logistics, equipment charter, or field survey expense. But beneath the surface, nothing about them added up. Petroforge Global was one of the world's largest energy conglomerates, with oil fields stretching from Texas to West Africa. Its executives often appeared on magazine covers, touting sustainability and innovation. Investors adored it. Regulators trusted it. But within weeks of receiving that anonymous tip, the FFAC realized they were staring at one of the largest corporate thefts in modern history. The whistleblower. The whistleblower was Raymond Osei, a Ghanaian petroleum engineer who had worked at Petroforge's offshore drilling site in Takoradi, West Africa. He'd spent years watching inflated contracts, ghost equipment purchases, and consultancy fees vanish into offshore accounts. When he raised internal complaints, his access badge was revoked, and his contract terminated under the pretext of restructuring. Before leaving, Raymond copied 4 gigabytes of data from the project's internal ledger system. Data that would later shake the very foundation of Petroforge Global. The forensic team. Assigned to the case was Dr. Caroline Hayes, a forensic auditor with a background in international finance crime. Known for her precision and persistence, Hayes had dismantled cartel laundering networks and exposed fraudulent procurement syndicates. Her first observation about Petroforge's financial statements was chilling in its simplicity. They were too clean. The company's revenue, tax filings, and expenditure ratios were mathematically perfect. A statistical impossibility. It was the kind of perfection that only fraud could create. Working with her was Special Agent Andre Lowell of the U.S. Financial Crimes Division and Lara Kim, an IT forensic specialist. Together, they began untangling the numbers that Petroforge had so carefully engineered. The mirage of exploration contracts. Petroforge claimed billions in exploration and logistics, expenses tied to operations in developing oil fields across Africa and South America. But when investigators traced these payments, they discovered that many of the listed contractors didn't exist. One such entity, Draymar Holdings, supposedly handled pipeline logistics. Yet its registered office in Houston was an empty lot. Another, Tethys Maritime Services, which billed $74 million for equipment transport, was found to be a paper company in Panama. No ships, no staff, no records. They built an empire on ghosts, Hayes remarked. Every fake vendor led to another offshore shell company, looping back to trusts managed in Switzerland and the Isle of Man. And behind those trusts were Petroforge executives, and, as they would soon discover, high-ranking government officials. Political protection. When the FFAC filed preliminary findings with U.S. regulators, they encountered an unusual delay. Someone inside the Department of Energy had placed a review hold on the audit request. Agent Lowell frowned. That doesn't happen unless there's political heat. Digging deeper, the team uncovered campaign donations and consulting fees paid to a former senator who had advocated for Petroforge's international tax exemptions. Meanwhile, Petroforge CEO Jonathan Rees began a public relations campaign, calling the allegations an attack on American energy leadership. But behind the scenes, company lawyers were busy shredding trails, literally and digitally. Servers were wiped. Data logs disappeared. Employees received gag orders disguised as confidentiality extensions. Still, Hayes and her team pressed on. The hidden ledger. One night, Lara Kim broke through an encrypted backup server previously thought to be deleted. Inside, she found a folder titled Black Gold _12, a digital ledger containing transaction patterns spanning 8 years. The ledger revealed a series of offshore accounts code-named after precious metals. Project Sapphire, Project Onyx, Project Goldleaf. Each represented a different laundering route. Billions had been routed through banks in Zurich, Dubai, and Nassau under various covers: equipment rentals, geological assessments, marine insurance. In truth, these were phantom payments used to divert profits before taxation and to pay bribes to foreign officials for drilling rights. What made the case explosive was the discovery that several of the bribes were disguised as environmental impact contributions, funds meant to clean oil spill zones but instead funneled into personal accounts. Raymond's fate. As the investigation deepened, the FFAC tried to contact the whistleblower. Raymond Osei had vanished. His apartment in Accra was empty, his phone disconnected. Local sources whispered that men had visited him days earlier, men who claimed to be company security. Weeks later, a fisherman found a body washed ashore 20 miles from Takoradi. The DNA matched Raymond. Caroline Hayes was silent for a long moment when the report reached her desk. Then she said, "We owe him justice." From that moment, the Petroforge investigation ceased to be just another corporate audit. It became personal. The cross-continental hunt. To trace the money, Hayes' team collaborated with Interpol, Europol, and the Financial Action Task Force, FATF. The forensic mapping revealed an intricate network spanning 12 countries, involving shell corporations, legal firms, and high-level political aides. They found internal communications where executives discussed cleaning black funds through offshore environmental programs. In one email, Jonathan Rees wrote, "Move the Onyx funds through the Zurich Channel. Keep it within the 4% expense ratio, no red flags." It was the smoking gun. The turning point. After months of covert data gathering, the FFAC obtained a federal court order authorizing a raid on Petroforge's Houston headquarters. The raid was executed at dawn. Employees arrived to find agents swarming the glass building, carrying out stacks of documents and computer drives. The company's chief financial officer, Alan Pike, was detained for questioning. In the interrogation room, Pike initially denied wrongdoing. But when confronted with encrypted emails bearing his digital signature, his composure cracked. "You think this stops at me?" he said bitterly. "You don't understand. This is bigger than any of us. There are ministers, senators, even regulators on the take." The global fallout. News broke within hours. Petroforge under federal investigation for multinational fraud. Markets trembled. Investors panicked. Governments scrambled to distance themselves. In Africa, local communities erupted in protest, furious that environmental cleanup funds meant for oil spill recovery had been stolen. Former workers held placards reading, "They took our oil, our land, and our future." The Justice Department filed charges of international money laundering, tax evasion, foreign bribery, and racketeering. The SEC froze over $3.2 billion in assets linked to Petroforge and its subsidiaries. The courtroom drama. The courtroom was packed as the case United States versus Petroforge Global et al. Opened. Prosecutors presented forensic evidence built from Hayes' reconstructed data maps. The jury watched as animations showed billions flowing from oil sales into offshore accounts, then returning disguised as foreign investment capital. Email exchanges revealed direct collusion between executives and foreign officials, while shell company registration forms bore Jonathan Rees's alias signature, JR4N. Defense lawyers claimed the transactions were standard industry practice. But when forensic experts demonstrated that invoices were copied, time-stamped identically, and billed for identical projects across different continents, the argument collapsed. The collapse of an empire. In a last-ditch effort, Rees offered a $400 million settlement in exchange for immunity. The Department of Justice refused. During his testimony, he admitted under oath that Petroforge had maintained a reserve fund for international relationship management, a euphemism for bribes. The jury returned guilty verdicts on all major counts. Jonathan Rees received 45 years in federal prison. Alan Pike and two senior executives were sentenced to between 20 and 30 years. Petroforge Global was dissolved, its remaining assets liquidated to fund environmental restitution programs in Ghana, Nigeria, and Ecuador. Months after the verdict, Caroline Hayes visited Takoradi, where Raymond Osei had lived. She met his elderly mother and handed her a Medal of Honor inscribed with the words, "For courage in pursuit of truth." The local government renamed the Coastal Cleanup Initiative the Osei Project. Standing by the ocean where Raymond's life had ended, Hayes reflected on the paradox of modern industry. They called it black gold. But in the end, it cost more than any treasure ever could, integrity, trust, and human life. Moral and call to action. In the global race for wealth, truth is often the first casualty. But justice is not a commodity, it's a commitment. Forensic auditors, journalists, and whistleblowers are the unseen defenders of accountability, risking everything so that corruption cannot hide behind borders or balance sheets. The fight against corruption begins not in the courtroom but in conscience.